Most people move through life half awake, eyes open yet unseeing. They drift through familiar streets, speak familiar words, and cling to the safety of what they already know. They believe they are conscious, but their world is built from habit, unexamined beliefs, and borrowed dreams. To see is not merely to look. To see is to awaken from the collective trance. It is to glimpse the machinery of the psyche, quietly turning beneath the surface of ordinary life. And once you have seen it, you can never unsee it. Those who see what others cannot often begin in confusion. Something subtle disturbs them. A dream too vivid, a coincidence too meaningful, a silence that feels alive. They sense that reality is thinner than it appears, that behind the veil of perception lies another order, alive, intelligent, whispering. It begins softly, as restlessness, a sense that the life you are living is not truly your own, that your words are echoes, that your choices have already been written by something unseen. And then a moment comes when the veil trembles and the soul looks through. You might see patterns where others see chaos. You might feel presence in empty rooms, or hear truth in the pauses between words. You might realize that dreams are not illusions, but messages from the depths, the language of your own unconscious. Carl Jung called this the moment of seeing through. It is both revelation and exile. Because the instant you see beyond illusion, you step outside the shared reality of those around you. You begin to walk differently. Your eyes search for meaning where others see coincidence. Your speech slows and becomes careful because you know words have power, and you find yourself alone, not in the world, but in the way you perceive it. There is danger in that aloneness. To awaken without grounding is to risk madness. The light of awareness can scorch just as it can illuminate. Those who see too much, too fast, often retreat into the familiar, trying to forget what they have glimpsed. But the psyche does not allow unseeing. Once consciousness expands, it cannot shrink again. You may question your sanity. You may long for the comfort of ignorance, yet deep inside, something ancient rejoices, for the soul recognizes its own awakening. The danger is real, yes, but it is the danger of transformation. When you pierce the veil, you do not only see the light, you see the shadows cast by that light. You begin to meet the unconscious face of the world, the fear, the cruelty, the emptiness that society hides behind its masks. You feel the coldness beneath the glitter, the hunger beneath politeness, the despair beneath success. And yet, this vision is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to make you whole. The world outside mirrors the world within. What you see in the outer shadow is the reflection of your own. To understand others' blindness, you must first understand your own. Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." The act of seeing demands that you leave behind the innocence of comfort. You become an exile from the collective dream, walking the thin border between madness and revelation. But in that exile, a strange peace can be found. When you are no longer afraid to look, when you stop turning away from what hurts, the veil itself begins to soften. You realize it was never separating you from truth. It was protecting you from your own depth. And now depth calls. You start to notice signs, the same symbol appearing in dreams and on the street, the same melody echoing through different moments of your life. Synchronicities, as Jung called them, weave your inner and outer worlds together. At first, they unsettle you. You wonder if you are imagining them. But then a quiet understanding grows. The world is alive with correspondence. Your psyche and the universe are in dialogue. The same intelligence that shapes your dreams is shaping the events of your days. Those who do not see will call it coincidence. They will smile kindly and look away. They will not understand the fire that has been lit within you. The danger of seeing what others don't is not that you see too much, but that you can no longer live as if you were blind. You start to listen differently, to walk slower, to feel more deeply. Even in ordinary moments, a drop of rain, a reflection in glass, a stranger's glance, something speaks to you. Life begins to reveal its symbolic face. Every symbol, every dream, points toward the same truth. That consciousness is not the end, but the beginning of a far greater mystery. To live with that awareness is both burden and blessing. You carry the loneliness of vision, but also the quiet joy of knowing that the world is alive with meaning. Even pain and loss are not accidents, but invitations to grow. When Jung wrote about the danger of seeing, he did not mean it as a warning to close your eyes. He meant it as a call to courage, to see, and to keep seeing even when what you see unsettles your peace. Because only by facing the darkness can you find the light that endures. Those who see what others don't walk a path without maps. They are wanderers between worlds, part dream, part earth, part silence, part song. They carry the memory of something whole and spend their lives giving form to it. To see beyond the veil is to stand at the edge of the known and hear the voice that whispers from within. Do not turn away. What you fear is your own reflection. Look deeper, and you will see yourself looking back. And so you look, and the veil becomes transparent. And behind every shadow, a light waits patiently to be seen. Once you have seen, you cannot go back. The curtain has been lifted, and the ordinary world no longer fits. Everything looks the same, yet something beneath the surface has shifted, as if the soul has turned its face toward another sun. At first, it is intoxicating. The discovery, the light, the secret pattern of meaning running through life. You begin to see connections where others see chaos. The song of coincidence follows you, and the symbols of dreams spill into waking hours. But soon the light becomes heavy. Awareness, like a flame, consumes what it touches. You start to see not only beauty, but the cost of that beauty, the fragility, the suffering, the blind movements of the unconscious in all things. You see the shadow behind the smile, the hunger behind the praise, the small deceptions that make the world tolerable. And that vision weighs on you. Jung once said that consciousness is a wound. To become aware is to bleed from what was once numb. The gift of sight is not freedom, it is responsibility. Because when you see, you cannot pretend not to. And when you understand, you can no longer look away. The others move easily. They laugh, complain, plan, forget, as the world expects them to. You move differently now. Your steps are slower, your silence is longer. You feel both too near and too far from everything. You sit in a room full of people and realize that the world you see is not the one they inhabit. Their words skim the surface, while your mind listens to the undercurrent, the emotional gravity beneath their laughter, the flicker of fear in their eyes. It is as though you are living on two levels at once, the visible and the symbolic, the world of forms and the world of meanings. The danger here is subtle. If you are not careful, awareness turns into isolation. You begin to mistake depth for distance and wisdom for separation. You start to believe that because you see differently, you no longer belong. That is how many lose their way, mistaking vision for superiority, mistaking pain for purpose. They build a tower of insight around their solitude and call it truth. But the deeper truth is humility. To see clearly is not to rise above others, but to kneel before the mystery that includes them all. The weight of vision is not meant to crush you. It is meant to ground you, to anchor awareness in compassion. Because if you cannot love what you see, you will turn your insight into judgment and your clarity into coldness. Every insight demands integration. Every revelation must descend into the heart. Otherwise it remains sterile, a beautiful idea detached from the pulse of life. So the soul begins another descent, this time not into the unconscious, but into the ordinary world, carrying the light it found there. You learn to walk among the blind without needing to announce your sight. You speak softly, because truth delivered without love can wound more deeply than ignorance. You begin to see that every person is carrying a burden invisible to the eye, and that their blindness is not their fault, but their protection. The weight of vision softens you. It teaches you reverence. You begin to understand that the world's contradictions are not flaws to be fixed, but tensions to be held. Every shadow belongs to some light. Every wound hides a seed of meaning. You start to notice beauty again, but a quieter kind. The beauty of imperfection, of things unfinished, of faces marked by time and struggle. You begin to realize that awakening is not about escaping the world, but returning to it with open eyes and an open heart. And yet, there are nights when you wish you could unsee. When the mind is tired and the soul longs for the simplicity of blindness. You sit in the dark and ask, why me? Why this sight? Why was I chosen to see what others cannot? But then a deeper voice answers, you were not chosen. You simply looked. You turned toward what most avoid, and in doing so, you became a vessel for awareness itself. The danger of seeing is not in the vision. It is in forgetting to feel. When the mind opens faster than the heart, light becomes fire, and clarity becomes cruelty. The task, then, is to balance both, to see and to love, to understand and to forgive. In Jung's language, this is individuation, the slow alchemy of the soul, where knowledge becomes empathy and vision becomes wholeness. You begin to accept the weight as sacred. It is not yours to bear alone. It is the collective burden of humanity made visible through you. When you suffer under it, remember, you are not separate from the world's pain. You are its witness. And in witnessing, you help transform it. Sometimes transformation looks like surrender. You stop trying to fix or prove or transcend. You allow life to flow through you again, light and shadow, love and fear, everything belonging to one rhythm. In this rhythm, meaning breathes. You begin to live not as a seer, but as a participant in the ongoing conversation between psyche and world. You realize that even the smallest act, a word of kindness, a moment of listening, is part of the great alchemy. And so the weight becomes gentler. It does not vanish, but it rests differently now. It no longer presses you into despair. It presses you into awareness. The light you once feared becomes the same light that allows you to see the sacred in the ordinary. Every shadow you encounter becomes a mirror. Every wound becomes a window. And through those openings, the soul keeps seeing, not as a burden, but as a blessing. You begin to understand that to see truly is to serve quietly, to live awake without demanding that others do the same, to embody clarity without arrogance, to carry vision not as a crown, but as a lantern. Because in the end, the gift of sight is not given to make you special, it is given to make you human, more fragile, more compassionate, more real. And when that realization settles, the weight of vision finally lifts, not because it is gone, but because it has become light. There comes a time in every awakening when the light becomes too sharp to bear. You have seen the truth behind appearances, and the illusion of belonging begins to dissolve. The world that once felt familiar now moves at a strange rhythm, and you find yourself walking through it like a ghost among the living. This is the solitude that follows revelation. The air between you and others thickens. Their words echo, but no longer reach you. They speak of plans, of goals, of pleasures you once shared, but now everything sounds distant, as if heard underwater. You smile and nod, yet your soul stands elsewhere. halfway between the seen and the unseen. The more clearly you see, the less you are understood. Insight separates as much as it illuminates. When you pierce the veil of collective illusion, you no longer fit inside it. People sense it. They sense something different in your eyes, something that unsettles them. It is not superiority. It is the quiet gravity of someone who has looked inward too long. At first, you try to return to them. You try to speak the way you used to laugh at the same things, to shrink your thoughts until they fit back into the shared language. But the words feel brittle now, unable to carry the weight of what you've seen. And slowly, inevitably, the distance grows. You walk alone not because you want to, but because there is no longer a place for what you have become. The road of self-knowledge is not crowded. It winds through silent landscapes where your only companion is your own reflection. In this silence, every echo becomes a teacher, and every shadow speaks your name. Jung wrote that loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important. You begin to understand what he meant. The deeper your awareness, the more ineffable it becomes. How can you speak of things that language itself was not made to hold? So you withdraw, not in bitterness, but in necessity. Solitude becomes the vessel through which you learn to listen, not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet voice of the psyche. That voice is not loud. It whispers from the edges of consciousness, from dreams, from small accidents of fate that seem meaningless until you notice the pattern. Isolation turns inward into introspection, and introspection into initiation. You begin to see that this loneliness is not punishment. It is a rite of passage. The soul retreats from the outer world so it can be reborn from within. Like a cocoon, it must darken before it transforms. But the darkness is not gentle. It presses against you. It tests your faith in meaning. Days pass where everything feels heavy and detached. You question your path, your sanity, your worth. You ask yourself whether insight was a blessing or a mistake. The light that once guided you now feels distant, as though hidden behind another veil. This is the stage Jung called the night sea journey, the passage through the dark waters of the soul. It is here that many turn back, longing for the warmth of ignorance, for the comfort of company. But those who endure discover something extraordinary. That loneliness, when faced completely, becomes communion. For in the depths of isolation, you meet something vast, the archetypal self, the unbroken center of your being. It watches through your eyes, feels through your heart, and speaks through your silence. When you stop seeking understanding from others, you begin to find it within. The paradox of insight is that it separates you only to connect you at a deeper level. You realize that every human being carries the same silence inside, even if they do not hear it. You begin to see loneliness not as a wall, but as a mirror reflecting the universal longing to belong, not to society, but to existence itself. Slowly, compassion returns. You stop resenting those who cannot see what you see. You remember that you too were once asleep. You begin to understand that each person awakens in their own time, and that forcing light into unopened eyes only creates pain. So you carry your awareness differently now, not as a torch that blinds others, but as a lantern that warms whoever comes near. You learn to be among people again, without losing yourself. You listen more, you speak less. You start to see meaning not only in silence, but in laughter, in imperfection, in the rhythm of ordinary life. The isolation begins to dissolve, not because the world changes, but because you have. You no longer demand to be understood. You no longer measure connection by agreement. You find communion in the shared mystery of being human, in knowing that everyone, in some hidden way, walks alone. And yet, Even as you re-enter the world, a trace of solitude remains, like a faint echo of your deeper self. It is not sadness, it is remembrance, the quiet awareness of the inner world that breathes beneath appearances. It reminds you to look beyond surface things, to listen between words, to honor the unseen currents moving through every soul. This is the gift of the isolation of insight. It strips you bare of illusions until only truth remains. It teaches you that connection is not sameness, but resonance. That love does not erase difference. It celebrates it. That true belonging arises not from being understood, but from understanding. When you learn to stand fully in your solitude, you discover that you were never truly alone. The same silence that fills you also fills the world. The same light that moves through you moves through all things. You are the witness, and the witnessing itself. In the end, isolation becomes integration. The outer world no longer threatens your inner one. You move between them freely, like a bridge between heaven and earth. You carry the stillness of the depths into the noise of the day. You see divinity in the ordinary and eternity in the moment, and so the loneliness that once haunted you becomes your strength. You learn to walk the world with the quiet dignity of one who has faced themselves and found not despair, but presence. You belong not to people or places, but to the eternal conversation between consciousness and creation. This is what it means to bear the isolation of insight, to be alone, yet connected to everything, to be silent, yet filled with meaning, to see clearly, yet love deeply. It is not the end of the journey. It is the middle, the turning point, where vision becomes embodiment. And when you emerge from this solitude, you will not shine brighter than others. You will simply shine differently, softly, steadily, like the first light of dawn touching a world that is still asleep. Every revelation is followed by a descent. After the brilliance of vision, there comes the slow return to darkness, not as punishment but as initiation. The light you have seen now calls you deeper, demanding that you make it real. What was once only understood must now be lived. You cannot remain at the surface of knowing. You must embody it, root it, and carry it through the shadows that shaped you. This is the descent into meaning, the stage where insight becomes transformation. It begins quietly, with a feeling of weight returning to your limbs. The world seems ordinary again, almost disappointingly so. You wake up, make coffee, look out the window, and wonder how something so transcendent could lead you back here, into the dull rhythm of daily life. But this is exactly where the psyche works its magic, not in the skies of abstraction, but in the soil of experience. The descent asks you to face what you avoided while chasing light, the unfinished emotions, the buried grief, the old wounds that waited patiently for you to return. The unconscious does not yield its treasure without cost. It reveals truth in proportion to your willingness to hold it, to bear its contradictions without running away. You may feel the urge to climb back toward clarity, to return to the safety of ideas and insights, but the soul has a different agenda. It does not want you to escape. It wants you to integrate. To become whole means descending into the very places where light does not yet reach. It means allowing the discomfort, the confusion, the uncertainty to reshape you from within. At first, this descent feels like losing yourself. The symbols that once guided you now blur. The voice of intuition grows quiet. Doubt slips in like fog at dawn, and you begin to question everything, the journey, your insight, even your sanity. This is the testing of vision. The mind that has seen truth must now be purified by the heart. Jung said that no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. He did not mean evil. He meant depth, the shadowed ground of the human soul. To embrace your darkness, is to become anchored in reality. Only then can the light within you find form that endures. As you descend, you notice life speaking again in small symbolic ways. The same patterns that once appeared in dreams now emerge in daily events. Conversations echo your inner conflicts. Accidents reveal hidden truths. Every coincidence becomes an expression of the unconscious at work, reshaping you through meaning rather than through reason. This is where the alchemy of the psyche begins. Opposites meet. Spirit and matter, light and dark, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. The friction between them creates heat, and from that heat something new is born, the beginning of integration. You start to see that every loss contains potential, that every descent carries the seed of ascent. But meaning is not found by thinking, it is found by surrendering. The descent asks you to relinquish control, to allow the unknown to lead. You learn to trust symbols more than explanations, intuition more than logic, silence more than noise. You begin to understand that truth is not a statement, but a relationship, something that changes as you change. In this stage, the soul becomes a kind of laboratory. Each emotion is a substance, each memory a catalyst, and every relationship a reaction. The ego resists. It wants clarity, resolution, certainty. But the deeper self thrives in paradox. It knows that growth does not come from answers, but from enduring the tension between opposites until something higher emerges. You may find yourself dreaming more vividly. The unconscious begins to communicate in images. Water, fire, doorways, birds, circles. These are not random decorations of the mind. They are living symbols, fragments of the myth you are unconsciously living. To descend into meaning is to begin understanding your personal myth, the unique pattern through which the universal soul expresses itself in you. And so, you live differently. You move slower. You listen deeper. You start to feel time itself changing, no longer linear, but cyclical, as if life were not a straight road, but a spiral descending and rising through the same themes. Each time more consciously, there are days when the descent feels unbearable. Old pain resurfaces, shadows you thought were gone return with new faces. The work of meaning is not glamorous. It is earthy, repetitive, often invisible. But in those moments of heaviness, something within you matures. You begin to sense that the meaning of suffering is not to be explained, but inhabited. You stop asking why, and begin to ask how. How can this shape me, soften me, teach me to love? Gradually, the descent stops feeling like falling and starts feeling like grounding. You realize you are no longer being dragged downward, but drawn inward. The darkness that once frightened you now feels alive, fertile, whispering secrets in a language you are just beginning to remember. You discover that the bottom of the soul is not void, but origin. And then, almost imperceptibly, light returns, not as blinding revelation, but as quiet radiance. It shines through your gestures, your patience, your eyes. It is no longer something you chase, it is something you carry. You have become the bridge between the depths and the heights, the unseen and the seen. This is the hidden purpose of the descent, to root your vision in humanity, to turn understanding into compassion. The deeper you go into your own suffering, the more clearly you perceive the suffering of others, not as weakness, but as the common language of existence. Compassion becomes not a feeling, but a state of being. You begin to realize that meaning is not something you find. It is something you create by how you live, how you interpret, how you respond. It is the art of transforming experience into consciousness. And that art requires descent, again and again, until life itself becomes the temple where light and darkness bow to each other in peace. When you emerge, you are not the same. The world does not look new. You do. You see the ordinary as sacred, the imperfect as complete, the unfinished as alive. You understand that life was never meant to be escaped. It was meant to be embodied. The descent into meaning does not end in light or dark. It ends in wholeness. It teaches you that heaven is not above and hell is not below. They are both within, shaping each other, weaving the eternal dance of becoming. And as you walk once more through the world, in the noise, in the faces, in the quiet, you carry with you the calm of one who has descended and returned, one who has touched the roots of being and brought back the fire of truth. You no longer seek meaning. You live it. You no longer chase transformation. You are it. And through you, the universe begins again. There comes a moment, quiet and almost invisible, when the search ends. After all the seeing, all the descent, all the isolation, something in you begins to soften. You no longer reach for light outside yourself. You begin to feel it breathing within you. What you sought was never somewhere else. It was waiting for you to become still enough to notice. You have walked through shadow, through silence, through the slow unraveling of who you thought you were. And yet, you are still here, clearer, gentler, deeper. The self that once feared the dark now carries it tenderly, understanding that light without shadow is blindness, and that the soul grows in the tension between the two. This is not a moment of triumph, but of quiet arrival. You realize that enlightenment was never meant to lift you above the world, but to bring you fully into it. You are not separate from life's contradictions. You are their meeting point. Within you, heaven and earth, light and darkness, awareness and matter, bow to one another in recognition. To become the light you found is to stop seeking and start radiating, not through effort, but through presence. The sun does not try to shine, it simply is. The same is true of the awakened soul. It does not speak of light, it becomes it. It moves through the world with invisible compassion, illuminating without imposing. You begin to see differently now. The eyes that once searched for signs now rest in acceptance. You see sacredness in the ordinary, the way morning light spills across a cup, the curve of a stranger's smile, the wind moving through old trees. Nothing is trivial. Everything participates in the quiet dialogue between seen and unseen. The mind, once so restless, grows still. Thought no longer chases meaning. Meaning arises naturally, like breath. You realize that truth is not a possession, but a rhythm, a dance between what reveals and what hides. You learn to trust that what needs to appear will, and what needs to remain hidden will ripen in its own time. This is what Jung called individuation fulfilled, when the conscious and unconscious no longer fight, but collaborate. You have made peace with paradox. You understand that your darkness is not an enemy but a root, that every descent prepares another ascent, and that love is the bridge holding all opposites together. You no longer feel the need to prove or defend what you know. Insight becomes humility. Awareness becomes empathy. You listen more than you speak, and when you do speak, it is from silence. You have learned that wisdom is not the absence of ignorance, but the capacity to hold it kindly. Sometimes, people will feel peace in your presence without knowing why. They may sense something ancient, something still. It is not you they feel. It is the space you have opened, the stillness that life itself moves through. This is the light made flesh, not dazzling, but steady, not loud, but transformative. You begin to live like the seasons. You no longer fear endings, because you have lived through so many deaths of self. You no longer cling to beginnings, because you understand that every beginning carries the seed of ending. You flow between the two, graceful and grounded, knowing that wholeness is not perfection, but participation in the eternal cycle. To become the light you found is to give without losing. You no longer seek recognition or reward. The act of giving itself becomes your sustenance. When you help, you do so quietly without needing to be seen. When you love, you do so freely without needing to be loved back. This is not self-denial, it is self-transcendence, the moment when the boundaries of I dissolve into the wider movement of being. You start to recognize yourself in others, not as reflection, but as resonance. Every face becomes a mirror, every story a version of your own. You begin to see humanity as one great psyche dreaming itself into form, each of us carrying a fragment of the same fire, each of us learning to bear it. There are moments, of course, when the old pain returns, when the heart tightens, when loneliness whispers, when fear stirs. But now you meet these visitors differently. You welcome them as teachers, as reminders that light and dark are not enemies but partners in the dance of consciousness. You breathe through them, and they pass. The wound does not vanish, but it no longer bleeds. It glows. You notice now that everything breathes together. People, trees, clouds, memories, dreams. The boundary between inner and outer softens. You sense that the world is dreaming you as much as you are dreaming it. Every sound, every touch, every silence is part of one living conversation, and you are both the listener and the voice. You begin to create again, not out of ambition, but out of participation. Whatever you make, words, gestures, art, moments, carries the texture of awareness. You no longer try to control meaning. You let meaning shape you. The world becomes your collaborator. Even loss, even imperfection, becomes part of the masterpiece. You realize now that to become light is not to escape the world's suffering, but to transmute it. The same darkness that once terrified you becomes the raw material of empathy. You have discovered the alchemy Jung spoke of, where lead turns to gold and pain turns to compassion. The gold was never in the sky. It was always in the heart that dared to descend. To live this way is to carry eternity in the present. You no longer rush, you move as life moves, sometimes still, sometimes in motion, but always whole. You become the witness and the action, the silence and the word. You are not trying to shine. You are simply transparent to what already shines through you. And when people ask you what you have learned, you smile, because there are no words. You cannot teach what must be lived. You cannot explain what can only be remembered. But your presence speaks for you, not as message, but as mirror. You have become the light you found, not because you escaped the dark, but because you learned to walk with it. You carry its wisdom in your bones, its warmth in your voice, its stillness in your gaze. You no longer fear the night, for you know it is the mother of dawn. In this state, even endings lose their sting. Death itself becomes a passage, not an erasure. You see that everything that dies returns in another form, that consciousness never ceases. It only changes its shape. You are no longer seeking immortality. You are living it, and so you move quietly through the world, leaving no trace but light. You touch lives not by teaching, but by being. You heal not by speaking, but by listening. You guide not by leading, but by walking beside. To become the light you found is to become fully human, radiant in your fragility, infinite in your tenderness, grounded in your presence. You do not belong to the world, yet you are the world knowing itself. And when the final silence arrives, it will not be an ending, but a return, a homecoming to the vastness that has been breathing through you all along. For the light you found was never yours to keep. It was the universe remembering itself through your eyes.